Welcome to the NC Spin After Spin. Additional comments from our panelists just available on our website. I want to ask each of you, what do you wish you had said on last week's show but didn't? Chris Fitzsimon, I'll start with you.
Well, we talked about Roy Moore's defeat in the Alabama Senate race to Doug Jones and what it says about the election. I mentioned that Republicans have lost legislative races around the country. Not a lot have been contested in these years, but they have lost ones, particularly in Virginia. Virginia State House went from, I think it was 66 to 34 to now it's 51-49, and there's four races that are in a recount. One of them, the Republican won by 10 votes. Another one, hundreds of ballots that were the wrong ballots were given out. So there's a reasonable chance Virginia legislature could be tied. We've talked a lot on the show, and John's talked a lot about Republicans made massive gains across the country in legislative races and took over states. I don't know if this is a trend yet, but it looks like
during Obama's term.
Right, during Obama's term, it looks like right now this is beginning to happen under Trump. It's way too early to call it a huge trend, but it's really interesting. It happened in Virginia, and almost every special election for a legislative race around the country, the Democrats have either won or done very surprisingly well.
Surprisingly well. Well, that's something we'll be watching next year. Rick Henderson, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
When we were talking about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, there's one thing that I didn't mention is the fact that the debate over the pipeline is very much of a direct lobbying effort at Governor Cooper. That you have people who are both supporting and opposing the pipeline, wanting the governor to come out on their side, and they are really making the appeals very much straight to him, thinking that he's the only person who can actually either stop it or, by giving it his blessing, can make it go forward. And the fact that these appeals are coming so straightforward to him is a very interesting thing.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you were advising Governor Cooper under those circumstances, what would your advice be?
I think what he's doing is actually about the right thing, is that he does have his environmental regulators looking at this situation, but I think he's eventually going to approve it simply because, for one thing, the people who are running these ads on television in favor of the pipeline, a lot of them are Democratic economic developers from eastern North Carolina.
Reminds me of some of Rufus's favorite sayings. I have friends who stand for it, and I have friends who stand against it, and I stand with my friends. Dennis Wicker, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Tom, last week I mentioned about how people are buying their groceries online and have them delivered to their houses. One of, I think, the favorite pastimes of Americans, in particular in the South, is going to the grocery store, bumping into their neighbors, talking to them about what's going on in their families, what's happening with them in the neighborhood, so forth and so on. Well, those days are waning because foot traffic is down in grocery stores. These companies like Amazon are taking over, and they're delivering these groceries to the houses of people across the country. And it's just going to be interesting to see what, if any, impact that has on tax revenues generated from grocery sales.
That was one of my father-in-law's favorite things to do when he came to Raleigh, was to wander around grocery stores.
Every time Elisa comes home from the grocery store, I want to ask her what she found out. And when I go, I enjoy talking to people there, you know, so it's just a great pastime of Americans.
John Hood, what do you wish you'd have said on last week's show?
Well,
and it may not be about grocery stores.
I know that I shouldn't say you guys have a really boring gripe, but what I will say about the Alabama election, Chris is right about the legislative races in other states interpreted with the special elections for Congress and the special election for the U.S. Senate in Alabama should make Republicans nervous, maybe not panicky, but nervous. What's interesting about it, and a couple of different people have run different numbers, but if you take the special elections for the House and for the Senate, of course, the Democrats, I don't think, have picked up any of the special elections in the House, but they performed a lot better than you would expect in these districts. The average shift is, 10 or 15 points in the Democrats' direction. Now, are those a random sample that represents the 2018 electorate? Not necessarily, but these are all signs that 2018 might shape up as a very standard issue, political science kind of a cycle where the party who's not in the White House does well. And if you add to that the fact that Donald Trump isn't in the 40s, like a President Obama might have been, he's in the 30s, certainly this will be an opportunity for Democrats to regain some of the ground that they lost in the last decade or so in governorships and legislatures around the country.
We'll be watching. Well, thanks for watching the After Spin. We'll have more video all during the week on ncspin.com.